Welcome to the next episode of the Personal Branding for Professionals video podcast. I am your host, Ketaki Vaidya, and today we are going to talk about something very relatable. Consider the last time you started something new, or it can even be your New Year resolution. So you wanted to make a change, you wanted to start a new habit, and you did that. So it might have been you trying to work out, it might have been you trying to read a book, but you did that. You overcame the biggest challenge of getting started. You took the first step, you did it for a few days, but then you did not feel motivated anymore and you got back to normal and you got back to where you started from. Now, if you've experienced this is not unique to you. We all face this all the time. This is a common experience that people have with change and disruption. If you can take even 1% of this video with you today, I'm sure that you'll be much better in your personal branding journeys. Because when you start your personal brand, it's about first figuring out what you want to stand for and then making all those changes in your life to walk on the path that you have chosen for yourself. And that can involve a lot of change, a lot of disruption. So if you can use this conversation to self-disrupt before you get disrupted and keep yourself motivated, then there is nothing better than that. Joining us today is Gregory Offner. Greg is a keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and coach speaking on the topic of disruption and creativity. I hope you have fun. Let's get started. Hey Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Ketaki, I'm really excited to be here and to be able to speak with you and your viewers.
Yeah, and I'm sure that today's episode is full of surprises and I'm really looking forward to it. So the very first question that I have for you, Greg, is that you have over 2 decades of corporate leadership. And from there, you went on to create this whole movement in the world where you were transforming the keynote speech to a keynote experience. So how did it all begin? Tell us about your journey.
Well, the transition from the corporate world into the work I do now really started with nearly losing the ability to speak. I had been living 2 lives, one during the day as a corporate sales leader and the other at night as a dueling piano player. So flexing my creative and entertaining muscle at night and really finding an opportunity to make a good income and provide for my family during the day. And the use of my voice throughout the entire day is pretty unusual. There aren't a whole lot of professions where people are speaking nonstop almost all day long.
Yeah.
So doctors weren't surprised that I ran into an issue with my voice, but they were surprised at the severity, as was I. When doctors discovered the issue, they said, you have 2 choices. You can do nothing and you'll lose the ability to speak in about 2 months permanently. Or you can undergo surgery. We're pretty confident we'll get your speaking voice back, but you may lose the ability to sing. And so what we decided to do was to give me the best shot at retaining my voice. We decided to go slow. Instead of doing one large procedure, do several smaller procedures. I didn't know that this would turn into 14 surgeries over a 5-year period, but it did, it has. And that experience set the foundation for me to move out of the corporate world and into this world of serving corporate clients, serving individuals who want to make a change and who want to use creativity more in the work that they do.
Oh, okay. And did this entire experience change the way that you looked at life? What did you realize when you were going through those days of hardship?
One of the things that I realized was that I had been chasing contentment for a very long time. I was very lucky in that when I got out of college, I quickly found a job, as I kind of refer to it, like a corporate job. That paid me a very nice salary and all these little perks that came with being a successful salesperson. And while I wasn't really interested in the role, I mean, it feels weird to say that, there were parts of it that I enjoyed: the freedom, the flexibility, the ability to meet new people at every sales call and find out about other businesses. The rejection, the actual process of what I did every day, I really didn't enjoy. But the money was really good and it was hard to just walk away from it. So over time, what I started doing was quieting the part inside of me that was longing to really express who I am, what I'm interested in, what I think the gifts that are unique to me. I quieted that. And instead I emphasized the part that, enjoyed going out and spending money and having all of these status symbols and that grew and grew and grew in terms of the money you make. But you reach a point where the money no longer fills that void.
Yeah.
And now you're just chasing. It's almost like a drug addict trying to find more and more and more of a drug, but never really finding that same satisfaction as they did the first time.
Yeah.
And it really required this big pause in my life, the loss of my voice, which for me, as a salesperson and a singer, was a death-like experience. It took that pause for me to say, okay, is this really important? Am I really going to live the rest of my life muting the part of me that's, I think, the most exciting, the most vibrant?
We all have these two sides, I would say, and it has took 2020 to happen for all of us to realize that we were not happy with our lives. Many people, they've moved out of their relationships, they've moved out of their jobs. Many people are now starting to become an entrepreneur, and it took this entire pandemic for us to realize that we were not on the correct path, right? So tell me one thing. I saw a lot of your interviews, and I read somewhere that you wanted to be a music teacher at some point, right? And then you are onto the path that you are on now. So how did you find the why of your brand? Because you always wanted to do something big in your life. You always had that goal. But how did you eventually find what the purpose of your life was?
So when I was in college, I have this very clear memory of being a freshman, the first year in university, and meeting an individual at a party, and they were asking me that's a similar question, Ketaki. They were saying, "What's your why?"
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know. I don't know yet. But what I do know is that if I could leave every situation and every person that I meet feeling a little bit better than they did before they met me, I'd be pretty happy with my life. And that has always stayed with me, the desire to entertain and uplift and make people happy. And the education part of it that you asked about was when I went to military school, the music program that I was involved in was very influential in shaping me.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have that same influence on others. What I found as I dug deeper into education as a profession was that it wasn't as satisfying for me as I thought it was going to be. And that there were likely other ways, quite candidly, more lucrative ways for me to teach and uplift others that didn't involve being a teacher in the traditional sense. And what I do very much now is teach. I teach other people how to make disruptions when it seems like they can't, when people think they're stuck, how organizations can manage and lead not only their people, but their industry through disruption, through changes, when it seems like everything's got to change. And often what I find and what they learn is that it only takes one thing to change for everything to change. What the actual act of change is versus what the perception of change is are often very different. And if you think about a professional sports player, an athlete, or if you think about a professional actor, when they're in the role, when they're in the middle of the game and they do something unbelievable, to us, it looks incredible, but they've practiced that over and over and over again. So for them, it's actually something quite small, but the impact it has is quite large. So for us as individuals, we're used to seeing the result of change, these big disruptions in the world, maybe even in our own life. And we assume that because the disruption is big, the way to get to that disruption is through big action. It's actually not. It's not very successful. The best way to get there is through small, sustainable steps.
Right. And I think one particular thing that struck me when I saw your interviews was you said that we often try to avoid loss, then trying to maximize our gain.
Yeah.
So why do you think that happens? Why is this mindset so common today? Why is this a tendency that we always wait for something bad to happen before we change ourselves?
Okay. So play with me here, will you? Can we do something fun, Ketaki?
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I want you to pretend that it's 200 years in the past Okay.
Mhm.
And you and I are explorers,
Okay.
and we're walking through the jungle together,
Mm.
exploring, being very quiet because there's lots of dangerous creatures in the jungle. And as we walk through the jungle, there's a clearing, right? Can you picture this clearing in your head? I hope all your listeners are picturing it too. So there's a clearing, all right? Now, in the clearing, we see two things. They're about 20 meters apart. Okay, the first thing we see is a massive chest. Can you picture that? Like a pirate's treasure chest almost?
Yeah.
And the lid is propped open, and there's gold and jewels and rubies and emeralds and diamonds shimmering inside this chest, right? Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Now, remember, 20 meters apart, there's something else.
Mm.
Ketaki, it's a huge tiger.
Okay.
What do?
What do I choose? I would take a little bit of that gold and run away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you're faster than the tiger, but ever since human beings were evolving,
Mm-hmm.
we really weren't faster than that tiger. And so our brain had to create this very quick decision-making process to help us choose between death and riches,
Yeah.
between loss and gain. And that part of our brain is called the amygdala. It's often called the reptile brain because it's one of the most ancient parts of the brain. And that regulates the fight or flight mechanism in our bodies.
Yeah.
The part of flee, of survive, right? You and I, the evolutionary thing that we would choose would be run away and come get the gold later once the
Yeah.
tiger is gone and we know we're safe. So that part of our brain is so strong that even today it impacts the decisions we make.
Yeah.
And even if we see a pot of gold or a gold treasure chest, with all those jewels and rubies somewhere, and that could be a new job, it could be taking care of our health a little bit better, it could be getting out of a toxic relationship. Even though we see that gold there, we're conditioned to be afraid of what we are going to lose because we always have to let go to go for something else, right? That's teaching a young child to swim. Initially, the hardest part is getting them to let go of the wall. But to learn how to swim, you've got to let go of the wall. And to make change in our lives, we have to reconcile that as we change, old Ketaki gets left behind.
Yeah.
So that you can find new Ketaki. Everyone who's watching this, wherever you are in life, whatever you're doing is okay. You're exactly where you need to be to make a choice about where you are tomorrow. Because if I hadn't had all of those experiences, failed jobs, failed relationships, bad decisions, unfortunate medical circumstances, if all those things hadn't have happened to me, I wouldn't have been where I was mentally and maybe physically when I made the decision to start my own business. And so anyone that wants to make a change, the first thing that I encourage them to do is to give themselves a bit of grace, right? A bit of latitude to say that where I am right now isn't where I have to stay, but it's okay. It's okay. In fact, I have to be where I am now to get where I'm going to be tomorrow.
Yeah. All these struggles that we have had, they're going to help us take better decisions for tomorrow and shape ourselves better for the journey that is to follow.
Yeah.
But there's also this mentality, or there's also this tendency that 2020 has given us, that we are looking at our lives and we are saying that, okay, I am not happy with my life. I've reached a deadlock. I don't know where to go. I have no ray of hope to hold on to. And everything that I see about my life is negative. So I don't know where am headed from here. I don't know why I reached here. So how would you say that someone handles that? Because that is a very demotivating place to be.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And to that person, I say, you need to work a little harder.
Yeah.
You need to work a little harder because saying that nothing is good, everything is negative is a cop-out. It's an excuse.
Yeah.
The truth is, if we work a little harder mentally, there's something, no matter how small it is, there's something that's going right. And there's a place to start. My heart is beating. My lungs are breathing.
Yeah.
When I got married, we had our wedding reception, and you may have seen this interview. I broke my foot at my wedding reception dancing. I'm not a very good dancer, right? And one of the most uncomfortable things about that process was not being able to move around effectively. It gave me a new appreciation for how great it is to have 2 feet.
Yeah.
And so there are some days when I'm having a really bad day that I just look down and go, well, all right, both my feet work. That's a good place to start. I can take myself physically wherever I want to because both my feet work. And I know that for someone who's having the worst year of their life, who feels like everything's going wrong, what I'm saying may seem a little glib. It may seem a little reductionist, like it's, oh, that's too easy. That's not real.
Yeah.
I felt that same way. When I was in the depths of depression, dealing with all of these vocal issues, I felt the same way. And in fact, many, many years ago, my first sales manager gave me a book by a man named Zig Ziglar, one of my favorite authors. And in that book, Zig talked about the power of perspective, right? Of saying, he used to love to say that when the clock goes off, the alarm in the morning, right? What do we call that? We call it an alarm clock, right? Well, when the building's on fire, an alarm goes off. When a burglar breaks into your house, an alarm goes off. What if we called it an opportunity clock? Because when you hear that bell, you have the opportunity to do something amazing with your day. And Ketaki, I heard him say that and I thought, you're an idiot. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What dum-dum says it's an opportunity? It's an alarm clock. Don't try to twist reality. And, but what I've learned is that he was exactly right.
Yeah.
That reality is only what we make of it. Right. Here's a great example. And I know you have a lot of listeners around the world. So this is a good, I think, example to use, given that I live in the United States. When I go to a conference, if I put a picture of Donald Trump up on the projection screen, there are some people in the audience who look at that picture, right? And they go, whoa, I love that guy. I'm so glad he's our president. And there are other people who look at that picture and they go, I can't stand that guy. He's a jerk and I wish he weren't my president. But the truth is they're looking at the same picture.
Yeah.
It's simply how they choose to perceive it. It's the reality they've created. And so when we're looking at that clock that makes a noise in the morning, what reality are we going to choose? Is it the alarm clock or is it the opportunity clock? Either way, we're right. And to that person who's having the worst year of their life, yes. Or could you choose to find what's going well? Could you make it a great year?
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel normal at first. It feels a little funny, like when you ever fold your arm, like fold your arms for me, Ketaki. Have you ever done this before?
Yeah.
Not that way, the other way, right? Do it the other way. Fold your arms the other way.
Yeah, I've not done it before.
No, how's that feel? It feels kind of weird. It feels kind of icky, right? Because it's not natural.
Yeah.
When we start using these perspective shifts, it feels a little icky. It feels a little unnatural. But what happens over time, just like folding your arms or going to the gym, if you're not the type of person that works out all the time, you get used to it and it becomes a part of who you are.
Yeah.
And that's the change that I love, that I get excited about helping people and companies make. Is not only doing things a different way, small sustainable changes that will lead to significantly better results, but also, and maybe more importantly, shifting the way they perceive things that are already happening, especially the things that they can't actually change. Like that report that your boss drops on your desk on Friday afternoon, right before you're about to leave for a weekend with the girls, and says, I need this Monday. We have two ways to look at that. And the way that we choose determines our future.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. And I think it's just this slightest shift that we have to take. It's the first step that we need to take. And then the transformation follows, right? So with the experience that you've had working with so many clients and helping them to find what their why is, what would you say is the major change in the mindset of those who are getting disrupted and those who are disruptors? There are two kinds of people in this world, one who get disrupted and others who are creating a disruption, the ones who are disruptors. So what's the major difference between these two kind of people? Is it the mindset? Is it the perspective with which they look at their lives?
That's a good question, Ketaki. I think the biggest difference is that people who are prone to be disrupted believe that there's a status quo, that there's a point in time where they can just go, all right, everything is gravy, and this is just how my life is going to be. And the folks who are constantly disrupting, who stay ahead of the curve, who lean into discomfort, they're the ones who realize that as long as you are constantly changing, constantly evolving, constantly improving, life, the changes it throws at you is a little easier to deal with. That concept from physics of an object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an equal and opposite force.
Yeah.
That equal and opposite force is death. So when you purposefully stop that motion, you're accelerating death. Now, this is an intellectual death. It's not necessarily a physical death. Although if you lie in bed forever and ever and don't move, you will die eventually because your body needs that movement.
Yeah.
So the individuals and organizations I work with value, or when we're done work, they certainly value little, small, right? Consistent, sustainable change. Because disruption is a change that sustains and sets a new standard. So, for example, before Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press, books were being written by hand. Took huge amounts of time, and books were incredibly expensive. Only the wealthiest could afford them. The printing press changed all that. The printing press was a disruption because it is a change in the way that books were written. It has sustained. We've never gone back to writing books exclusively by hand. And it set a new standard because we never will go back to writing books by hand. There's a better way. And now we print them with a laser printer or whatever the heck it is that they use when they print books at like a mile a minute. Way faster than Johannes Gutenberg's printing press ever did. So there have been disruptions along the way. No one disruption lasts. But the effects that a disruption has can be lasting.
Right. And if we bring the same to our life, where we are constantly disrupting, we're constantly looking at what we can change, we're constantly, it's not just one milestone that we are chasing, but it's one milestone after another that we are looking at and trying to change ourselves. And along the way, I think even when you find your why, it's very easy to chase that why initially and say that, okay, I'm changing my life and I'm going to make these changes and this and that. But if you don't follow it up with consistency, then in the end, it just becomes something that was an unfinished project. So how do you think that we can train our brain to be consistent in our journey when we are starting with something? Because it's very easy to start something new and then we leave it along the way because we are no longer interested and we don't know why that is happening.
Yeah, I can tell you why it's happening. It's because it's not really what you want. The biggest challenge that my clients have when they come to work with me is that I don't settle for what I call surface goals, superficial goals. I demand that we identify their root goals. And I have a process that I walk them through that helps achieve that. And the thing about root goals is it's going to drive you as a motivator through all of those hiccups that cause the inconsistency. So if you say, well, Greg, and I like to work out, so I use the gym a lot as an example. It's also a really easy example because most people don't like to work out. If you say, Greg, I want to go to the gym 4 days a week, every week this year, I'd say, great. What's going to happen when you do that? And you might say, well, Greg, I am going to feel healthier. I'm going to get in better shape. And I am, maybe going to be able to hit this strength goal, lift a certain amount of weight or run a certain amount of meters or whatever it is, right? And then I would say, okay, and what's going to happen when you can do that? How's that going to make you feel? What's that going to do for you? And generally, this is about the place, Ketaki, where my clients go, what do you mean? Isn't what I just told you enough? No, it's not. That's where most people stop. See, everybody has two reasons for what they do. They have a good reason and they have the real reason. See, a good reason is, well, I'll be healthier and I can do 20 pull-ups and wouldn't that be great? And people go, yeah, good for you. Go get it. No, that's just that reason sounds good, but that's not the real reason. When you can do 20 pull-ups, or when you can run 2 kilometers, or when you can feel better, what's going to happen then? And then there's a pause, and they say, well, I felt pretty down on myself, like I couldn't accomplish much. And I think that would give me a real sense of accomplishment. So your goal, or at least the goal we're getting closer to, is that you want to feel a sense of accomplishment. Now, if I can help you do that, number one, it may not even involve the gym. It may have nothing to do with working out. That's often what I find, is that what people tell me their goal is sounds good, right? But it's not the real reason. There's something else. Right. I want to get at that real reason. And too many people settle for the good sounding reason. That's why they stop. Because all of a sudden, when there's nobody to tell that reason to, it doesn't sound so good anymore. They just don't care.
Yeah, and that does happen. And I'm going to ask you a $1,000,000 question on that, that when this happens, we set something for ourselves, we have our own journey. And
right.
If we are being idealistic, we like to think that we are going to just focus on our progress. We are going to focus on how we are transforming, and we're not going to look around the world and feel jealous. But then we look at the journey that others are having. We look at their accomplishments. We look at how great they are doing in their life, and then this envy starts coming in, right? And you cannot avoid that. Or people like to say
great,
on LinkedIn
Ketaki, great compared to who?
These can be your peers. These can be people
right.
who are having similar goals.
Well, so let's stop for a second and just really unpack that, because it's a great question you're asking.
Yeah.
Let me see. How can I phrase this? There are so many people worried about being millionaires who have never earned $100,000.
Yeah.
And there are so many millionaires worrying about being a billionaire, and they've never earned $10 million. So compared to who, right? Is a millionaire rich? Not compared to a billionaire. So if all they're seeing on their Instagram feed, or they're comparing themselves to, as billionaires, then they probably feel like crap every day. And yet they're more wealthy than most of the people on the planet. So when someone says, I'm not successful, or my life isn't going well, or, things, I'm not happy, I'd say, compared to who? Compared to who? Teddy Roosevelt, an American president, said that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of joy. When we start comparing our journey to other people's journeys, unless it serves as a source of motivation to say, I'd like to be like that person. I really admire the work that person is doing, and I'd love to do some of it. That's a good kind of comparison. A very toxic and a very dangerous type of comparison is to look at someone else and to say, why are they doing so much better than me? Why do they have all the luck and I don't?
Why is it always me? Why is it always me?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is being idealistic. We all understand we should not do that. But then there comes this point where we see people who are very close to us, or people who are in our circle of influence, and we look at them, and then they had similar goals, or there's something about the way that they're achieving their goals that we think it came easy to them, or that they always had it in them. And then this self-doubt starts coming in, right? So then you feel like an imposter. You feel like you never had it in you. And then this entire the negative zone starts to come in. You get into that negative zone, and then before you know, you are all depressed. So how do you think we can tackle that? We know that we should not compare ourselves with others, but being practical here, that does happen. And I've seen so many people not take correct decisions because of the underlying envy that they have within their mind. So what would your advice be?
So I have this rule that I'm playing with that's called the 10 feet of tolerance rule. All right. So think about it this way. Have you ever been in a long congested line, maybe at the airport? Right. And let's say, first of all, have you ever been in a long line like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, let's say that you're in this line and you're on your phone, right? You're on your phone and you're not paying attention, and the line moves ahead of you, but you don't move.
Yeah.
You stay still, right? It's about 10 feet between you and the line before the person behind you is going to go, hey, let's go. What are you waiting for? Get a move on. People in our life are similar. You can, this is a metaphorical 10 feet now that I'm talking about, but your life can get better by about 10 feet before the people in your life start to go, hey, hang on a minute. Why does she get all that advancement? Why does she get all this praise? And then we come back to the treasure and the tiger. Because every time you move 10 feet, their world changes. You've gotten close to the treasure and they're still worried about the tiger. And so the people in our own life often, most times unintentionally, try to sabotage our success, or at the very least, don't try to help our success. Because for every 10 feet we go that they don't, now their life sucks and ours doesn't. It's just 10 feet of tolerance that people have. And so when we think about comparison and how dangerous it is, we want to be mindful of that 10-foot rule.
My final question to you, Greg, is what would your advice be on anyone who is starting to find themselves or who's getting started on their personal branding journey? What would your advice be?
My advice would be keep going. It's going to be difficult. If you don't have a guide, a mentor, a coach, it's going to be difficult. Because there's a lot of tough questions that you're going to need to ask yourself along the way. Questions that we've either conditioned ourselves or have been conditioned by those around us not to really ask. Like getting to a root goal, like really arriving at our motivation for doing things. But when you get there, when you persevere through the difficulty, what you're going to find on the other side is amazing. The way that you feel, the way that you show up in different situations, it's truly amazing. And if there's anything I can do to help support you on that journey, I'd love to. And I know that Ketaki would do the same for you if you reached out to her. Because one thing I'm certain of is that despite what you may hear, there's enough success out there for everyone. Everyone. And if we just help each other find it, this world could be a lot better for everyone in it. There are folks out there that may hear this message and say, well, forget him. I only care about me. Okay. You know what? That's your prerogative. You're certainly welcome to feel that way. But humanity survived as a species because we learned how to work together. And if you embrace that, instead of being afraid of your vulnerability, instead of being scared to admit that you're doing something scary, exciting, but scary, when you can be vulnerable and collaborate with those around you, you would be amazed at how quickly your results grow farther and faster than you ever thought possible. So keep going. That's my advice. If you're starting this branding journey, keep going. It's worth it.
Yeah. And I think the biggest takeaway from our conversation today, and I'm going to use your analogy here again, that we all have to find that treasure of potential that we have within ourselves while saving ourselves from the tiger of all the negative emotions that can deter that journey, right? So it's very important to keep going, and it can really be difficult, but the destination is totally worth it. And even the journey has a lot to offer. So thank you so much, Greg, for all your insights and for all the wonderful analogies. Loved it.
It's a pleasure, Ketaki. Thank you for having me on.
If you found value in this video, please subscribe to my channel. See you next Monday.